COVID money train is coming to an end. The government and pharma is destroying 100 million vaccines due to a lack of use, lost confidence, shattered trust. And now the laboratories, all the PCR testing labs, they're laying off people. Again, due to lack of scale, lack of demand, right? This is incredible. So the pandemic pantomime, we've been gaslight for the last 2 years, is coming to an end. And what's getting more interesting is not only did Deborah Birx do a fake mea culpa last week, right? She says, well, we lied, we tried to get this and this, that. All right, she lied. That's all she ever does. The scarf lady. For Robert Redfield, the former director of the CDC under Trump, one of the three evil triplets on Trump's stage there, called the White House Task Force, he's come out swinging against Fauci. This is just the beginning, folks. This is the endemic. This is what the end of a gaslit black operation psyop looks like. They're going to go full cannibal on each other. They're going to be pointing fingers. They're going to be pointing up. Eventually, Fauci will get pointed out, and eventually Bill Gates will get pointed out, and eventually Klaus Schwab will get pointed out. And this is how it's coming to an end. They're going to get blamed for taking part in a mass genocide, lying under oath numerous times, right? And everything else they've done. They've been part of this premeditated murder program that is global. That's what's coming to an end. And you know what? I can smell it now. I can feel it. It's sort of like the sunflowers of the Van Gogh painting, just bleeding off of the fields. We're here. We're getting very close to where this all turns around. In-house today, I have a very special guest who I met a couple of weeks ago at a GOP convention here in Sarasota. His name's Robert Kraft. And Kraft, or Crafty, is very interesting because he's figured out a lot of things. And when you have an event in your life, he was vaccine injured, like my son was vaccine injured, you kind of wake up to what's really going on, and then you realize, there's a vaccine program, a farce and fraud and everything else. You realize connected to the rest of the government, which is the same thing. And then you realize a lot of your rights under this Babylonian system we've been living, the financial system, legal maritime, civil law system, all of it's corrupt. And we've been denied our actually natural common law rights. This is going to be a very interesting discussion today. So the end of tyranny looms on the horizon. It's time for a heavy dose of unrestricted truth. Let's roll.
Died. 1/3 of the entire world population was infected. There are several very interesting things about the Spanish flu. First of all, it didn't start in Spain. Secondly, it wasn't a flu. There's more, but let's start with these two, shall we? If it didn't start in Spain, then where did it? In the US. If it wasn't a flu virus, what was it? It was a bacteria that caused severe and in most cases lethal pneumonia. Long story short, during the first half of 1918, an experimental bacterial meningitis vaccine cultured in horses by the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in New York, now the Rockefeller University, was injected into soldiers at Fort Riley. The so-called Spanish flu was a vaccine experiment gone horribly wrong. 2 million of them went overseas. They fought under poor sanitary conditions, so the bacteria spread like wildfire wherever they went. The story was then spread that these soldiers would come home with all sorts of European diseases, so the American population was vaccinated as well. Who was in charge of that distribution and mass vaccination program? The Rockefeller Institute. Who was the main scientist in charge? Dr. Frederick Gates. Those who survived became cloud adults, meaning they spread the bacteria to others, even the non-vaccinated. In modern COVID days, we would call it shedding. The vaccinated infecting the non-vaccinated. Amazing coincidence, right? Frederick Gates then, Bill Gates now. Rockefeller Initiative then, Rockefeller Initiative now. Disease developed in Fort Riley, US then, disease developed in Wuhan, China now. Closed down societies then, closed down societies now. Cloud adults then, shedding now. All for our own good, our own safety. Back then and now.
The COVID death cult, as they call the CDC. Yes, that's what we've been fighting. Oh, and she left out Bill Gates' father, William Gates, who was one of the charter members of Planned Parenthood. You know that abortion killing machine company? That's for women's health, supposedly. Yeah, right. The Gates is part of the cabal. You know, part of that Georgia Guidestone that was destroyed at the beginning of July, which was beautiful. The 500 million people on Earth, which means they get rid of 93%. Well, unfortunately, their pandemic didn't work out the way they thought it would. And in fact, it's completely fallen apart. And it's thanks to a lot of people. But let's go with President Trump. I'll start there. Let's go to the slide deck. This is just a reminder where we've been, where we are, where we're going. So look at this. So President Trump created the White House Task Force, and who did he put up there? Anthony Fauci, Deborah Birx, and of course, his then CDC director, Robert Redfield. Right? Let's go to the next slide. There they are, the unholy trinity. The two of them, Redfield and Birx, are now basically going to be pointing the finger at Fauci, and Fauci is going to point up to Bill Gates. It is almost, and Tedros, it's almost a given, because when they're faced with their own, end of their lives, their own indictments, their own executions, I think a lot are going to talk. Fauci will even talk when it comes to being pushed in that direction. Next slide. This is a master. President Trump was a master. He schooled everybody, all the American people, and actually people in the press and people around the world, that these criminals, Fauci, Birx, and Redfield, not shown here, that they are the people to get to know personally, because when the bell tolls at the end of this year, we all know who these people are, and it's all coming out. This was a couple of years ago. So hats off to the master chessman, President Trump. Next slide. There we go. So more criminals on stage. Pence, the Judas, the backstabber of the election, right? The alleged pedophile, Mike Pence. There he is, along with them. I'm sure it'd be very interesting to look at Mike Pence's emails and communication between those two and others to really find out what has gone on. Next slide. Yep, President Trump was the one who exposed them all. He simply brought them on stage, let Fauci's ego feed into him, because Fauci's the smartest guy on the planet. We know that, right? So let Fauci just continually waffle and misdirect and contradict himself on a weekly basis. We've been entertained, still doing that. But now Redfield's pointing a finger at him, and Birx will be soon pointing a finger at him. And she's already come out and said the vaccine's a complete fraud. So she's already come out and said that. So this is coming to an end. Next slide. So this is not Mount Rushmore. You're not going to see the busts and faces of Fauci, Birx, and Redfield on any mountain anywhere, on any Georgia guys. There's nothing like that. They're going to one of three places: Guam, Gitmo, or Diego Garcia, in my opinion. There'll be military tribunals held in those places coming soon. If not already, we just might not know about it. But those are the locations for criminals like that. So what are your thoughts? My thoughts is President Trump triangulated those three into the most amazing thing we've ever seen, because now the truth is coming out 2 years later on all of them. It is stunning, and they're going to be pointing fingers because they're going to make plea deals. Redfield, plea deal. Birx, plea deal. They're all going to point up. Gates, Fauci, Schwab, whoever else. They're going to continue to point their fingers up is what's going to happen. So let's go to image number one. COVID. Look at this good news. Layoffs hit the labs and COVID testing dwindles. Yeah, it dwindles because there's zero demand. It's all fake demand. So basically, this is almost game over. They're running out of money. And the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell today, what are you doing? 75 basis point increase to try to cool off inflation, right? Biden inflation, but that's going to destroy the housing market and the automobile market and the repo market and all these markets where people need to borrow money in order to buy something, right? That's what's happening. So you can add that catastrophe. It's all coming together now. COVID labs are done. Amazing, right? So I read something today on a Zero Hedge commenter on a different article, but this is so true. And I've got the guy's username, but it's, if you own gold, you're the king. If you own silver, you're the knight. But if you barter and you own your own goods, you're a peasant. But the best of all, if you own debt, you are a slave. That is how the fiat monetary system, from Samaria to Babylon to Phoenicians, all the way through the Vatican, the city of London, the maritime port called Washington, D.C., Wall Street, that is how they've always operated. And if you think about the last few years, you see nothing but consumer debt, corporation debt, national debt, countries that are in debt, 200 out of 205 are all in debt and on the verge of bankruptcy. This whole system is coming to an end. It's all been transferred off. All these countries that are national incorporations or incorporations, it's coming to an end. It's done. Let's go to image 2 because this is important with my guest today. So I wrote this book in 2006, The Massive Manipulator. It's about the autism epidemic and the CDC corruption, 22 years ago. Well, what's interesting, I had a chapter 5 there called Agent Orange, New Black. And in that, the Agent Orange, the CDC was given $71 million, 7 years to a 4-part study, right, to figure out, is there a connection between Operation Ranch Hand, the planes are flying above, and troop movement below, and all the Agent Orange damage done to our Vietnam veterans. And of course, what did the CDC do? Well, instead of finishing the study in 1989, they quit in 1987. 2 years short, left $20 million on the table out of $71 million. It's a lot of money back in the 80s. That was total insanity. No government agency I've ever heard of in my life walks away from $20 million, but they did. Why? It's a cover-up, obviously, right? They don't want the government to be liable for trillions of dollars or billions of dollars, whatever it would have been. But there were hundreds of thousands of Vietnam vets, and then you had all the Vietnamese people and their second and third generation babies that are all malformed due to Agent Orange and other defoliants. Chemical warfare people, right? And who was the principal investigators for the Agent Orange study? Her name was Dr. Colleen Boyle. And her assistant PI was Dr. Frank DiStefano. And those of us parents who have known about the CDC corruption on vaccines and autism know both of them very well because they were never fired after that study. They were promoted all the way up to Frank DiStefano being the director of vaccine safety at the CDC, and Colleen Boyle, who retired 2 years ago, but she became the director of the NCB-DDD, basically the National Child Birth Defect Disability, Development Association, which is an arm of the CDC. They were promoted to the very top to continue this fraud, this vaccine injury program. So when the 80 or 90% of the vaccinated wake up to the bioweapon poisoning them, imagine when the other parents realize their children were poisoned all along with the childhood vaccine schedule. The whole system is going to collapse, right? How do you deal with quitters and obfuscators? You indict them. You bring them in front of military trials. You bypass all the corrupt legal bar association system, all the favorable judges, all the catch and release. You put them in military trials in those bases, maybe on some bases on land, maybe out 12 miles out in the ocean, international territory, maybe put them on a ship or something, and you start these tribunals because this needs to happen. It's not just COVID. They've been killing our babies for a long, long time. All right, in 2000, 22 years ago, you had 1 in 2,000 babies became autism. My son was one of them. All right, he's 22 now. Well, New York Post just published an article based on a study 2 weeks ago that said now it's 1 in 30. So it's gone up. We know autism is a disorder, therefore it's not. Can't spread like the flu or bacterial pneumonia. It's a disorder. It's an environmental cause. Environmental cause is the vaccines with all of their poisons in them. Let's go to image number 3. Agent Orange. There's a shot from Vietnam. Next image. People go back and say chemtrails don't exist. Well, those are chemtrails. It's called Agent Orange chemtrails in Vietnam. This program has been going on for a long time, people. That is Operation Ranch Hand. That was the name of that, and we'll get into my guess in a second. But let's go to video number 2 because Yuval Harari, the lieutenant to Klaus Schwab, is just a total 140-pound psycho. Maybe it's 130 pounds, dripping wet.
It pushes things in its own interests, even if it doesn't benefit the vast majority of the population. This has happened so many times previously in history, and it's probably going to happen again. One of the biggest dangers to the planet today is this technological utopia, because probably for the elite it will work. If bad comes to worst, and when the flood comes, the scientists will build a Noah's Ark for the elite, leaving the rest to drown, the rest of the people and then the rest of the ecosystem. But they are likely to be able to construct this technological Noah's Ark, which is probably what much of the elite is counting on.
It's really amazing. He's actually talking about the elite, and he's part of that group. But they're not elite, as Laura Logan said. They're a cult. Always take it a step further. They're a death cult. That's the cult they are. Funny that Yuval thinks they're going to be better than God with all their scientism and all their experiments and all of that, right? But you're not. You can go ahead and build that ark, and I'm sure God's going to destroy the ark, and he's going to free his children. That's what's going to happen. Let's go to our guest image, Robert Kraft, and I will read his brief bio. Robert L. Kraft was born in Englewood, Florida. He served in the United States Air Force like his father did in Vietnam. More on his parents during the interview with a Vietnam Agent Orange angle as I open the show. Kraft's family heritage has served in every American engagement back to the revolution. Thank you for that. Thanks for the service. In 1999, the U.S. Air Force discharged Robert with honorable conditions due to his refusal to take the anthrax vaccine in 1999. After a bad physical reaction to the first shot and extensive research, he came to the understanding the whole program was a fraud and refused to participate. After the Air Force, Robert entered the fire service and became a firefighter paramedic instructor and trainer. In 2020, Robert and his organization conflicted. Basically, they butted heads in regards to Robert bringing to the attention inappropriate policies and procedures, poor management, bad legal, moral, and ethical behavior, and that put the public at risk. We're talking about 2020 is when the pandemic happened, and there was a lot of stuff done at the government behest, but that was very bad, and I'm in agreement with Robert. We can get into details in a little bit. The organization ignored, denied, and retaliated, and even propagated criminal behavior to discredit Robert to no avail. In 2022, Robert continues to battle the organization with ongoing litigation. This is one of many litigations he has, but he's doing it differently. Robert discovered something is amiss in the government and decided to learn what and why. He is a philosopher who seeks knowledge. That quest has led him to common law, not civil law or maritime law. Life is all about time, place, jurisdiction. That is me adding to that, right? Jurisdiction is going to be key here. Natural common law that has been hidden and obfuscated from us all along. Let's welcome Robert Kraft. Great to have you.
Thank you, James. I appreciate you taking me on your show.
Let's talk about your parents and Agent Orange, since I set that all up for you to get into it a little bit more than your bio.
Yeah, my mom was the one who talked to me about it before she passed in 2020. So my dad had died. My dad actually was not one of the field troops. He did 2 tours voluntarily. He was stationed in Da Nang. He was actually the sergeant on the ships that would come in that actually carried the material. So he was the logistics officer, or NCO, that was managing the stuff going out to get on the planes to actually be distributed, which was worse because there was a lot of it that had spilled onto the docks. It was all evaporating. He had breathed it in. When he died at 39, he had 4 different types of cancer. I was 7. Yep. and it was just a few months. So from that point on, I was basically a latchkey kid. It only took him a couple months to die. And then my mom started fighting, and come to find out, they had gotten a hold of the group that she was fighting the government with, had gotten a hold of an interior document from DuPont, and it released that they had filtered out one of the processes that actually filtered dioxin. The dioxin, that process sped up their ability to make the product, but unfortunately it left the dioxin that was absorbed by the troops. And that's why the Vietnam veterans have benefits now because of Agent Orange.
Yeah, no, it's a stunning story. We could talk about that entire show. We'll probably do that another time. But I want to bring up this other image because you're in a battle now with Sarasota County over school books that should be banned. Let's go to the image if we can. So there's the image. There you go. So it's got your name. And what you're discussing here is that these books should be banned, and then you're fighting them a little differently than most people. Want to explain a little bit about that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I've come to find out, and this has been a process, 3 year study. Right now, my opinion is what's in my lawsuit, which says that those books are obscene. Now, a rational, reasonable person like us would say, yes, they are obscene. The problem is we don't understand our common law, and we don't understand what we were actually given. Our common law is where we determine facts, and that's our county law, and we need to determine facts by declaratory judgment. So under Marbury versus Madison, no man can be the cause of his own judgment. What that really is saying is that you need to bring these questions before a jury, a trial by jury, and then you need to get them to agree, and that makes it a fact. So what I'm doing is I'm actually exercising that specific process that's built into the preamble of our Constitution and built into our Bill of Rights to get a determination or a declaratory judgment of fact. So the jury is going to decide if those books are actually acceptable for public or if they are actually acceptable for private use. Then once the jury decides, it's not a question anymore, it becomes law by fact under the 7th Amendment. So that's the process I'm proceeding with the books themselves. The lawsuit is actually a second part, which I requested authorization to a grand jury. So the grand jury is ours under a case versus U.S. versus Williams, where Justice Scalia said that the people own the grand jury. You have to get an authorization in a trial by jury to take them in and actually have them indicted. That is our common law process. And a jury must say, yes, there is enough evidence, and the charges that I got them with was neglect, child neglect, and inciting an insurrection, because they are ignoring the people, and things are getting worse, and there's more contention, and there's more police officers. People are getting thrown out. Their rights are being violated. And those people are going to testify. And when those people testify, it should be enough that they'll authorize the grand jury. And then the grand jury will determine the indictment.
I love the fact that you're telling me that it's the government that's inciting the insurrection, not the people. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, they use a process. It's a very simple process, and it's ancient. The game hasn't changed. The more that I read going back, hundreds and thousands of years, man has not changed, and our tactics are always the same. And it's interesting because when you actually do a little research, you find out that the first class murder, defense murder 101. It's discredit the witness, discredit the evidence, or overwhelm the system with so much propaganda that there has to be some possible way that they're innocent. They're just exercising that. It must have been the only class they ever actually participated in. So, because it's the only tactic they got, and they're not very good at it. But it's a strategy that they use, and it's worked because we get angry and we get upset. We just have to take them to the place where they don't have a choice. They have to talk, and that's in a courtroom in front of a jury.
Right, and we're going to discuss all that. We're going to discuss the Four Horsemen angle, because you're understanding of the four horsemen is different than anybody else I've ever heard, including theologians. I find it very interesting, and I'm actually with you on it because it actually makes a lot of sense. And we're going to show a couple of your videos because your videos are very informative and really good. We're going to take a quick commercial break with our lead sponsor, Kirk Elliott, PhD, Private Advisors. We'll be right back with Robert Kraft.
Inflation is out of control. The price of gasoline has doubled in a very short time and interest rates are set to rise. How do you protect and grow your portfolio to make sure that you do not outlive your assets? Invest in annuities that have rate lock. Rate lock is an innovative new feature that allows you to lock in your rate of return at any time during the year to lock in these volatile upswings of the market. And unlike CDs and money market accounts, they accumulate tax deferred and can participate in the upside of market indexes. And they're probate free and they can provide an income that you can't outlive. With all the different companies, features, indexes, and benefits which annuities offer, it can be confusing to choose which annuity is best for your unique situation. Let a company you can trust help you select a rate lock annuity that's right for you. Add an annuity to your retirement portfolio and start enjoying the many benefits that smart investors love. Call the Cleveland Insurance Group at 844-USA-2024. That's the Cleveland Insurance Group at 844-USA-2024. The Cleveland Insurance Group, 844-USA-2024.
Government-induced inflation, taxes, rising interest rates, political instability. All of these can have a crushing effect on our investments, often causing the stock market to go down. But they can also cause gold and silver to go up.
Hi, this is Dr. Kirk Elliott. Buy gold, buy silver, buy now, but buyer beware. Precious metals companies are not created equal. As a PhD economist, I have been in the financial, economic, and precious metals business for 3 decades. The philosophy of my firm is people over profit. I encourage you to read my bio to learn more about me at kirkelliottphd.com.
Now is the time to own physical metals in an IRA, 401k, and outside of a retirement plan. Don't let the government destroy your hard-earned assets any longer. Call 720-605-3900 or visit kirkelliottphd.com.
Yeah, there's a short video here that Robert the philosopher, I call him, did that God exists, and it's two and a half minutes, and it's really worth listening to. Let's go with video number 3.
So as a philosopher, I get asked this question a lot. People ask me if God exists. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to prove that God's a fact. Do we believe that the laws of nature exist? In other words, does gravity exist? I hope everybody says yes. Number 2, do we agree that those laws can be measurable and calculable using mathematics? In other words, we can predict the outcome. I hope everybody says yes. Do we agree that it requires intelligence and logic to do mathematics and to actually show the work on paper and describe it and predict it? The answer is yes. Do we know of a man or human being that ever created a law of nature? The answer is no. Therefore, if the laws of nature exist and they are measurable by mathematics and they are calculable and it requires intelligence to actually determine the outcome of those laws, then it would require an intellect or an intellectual being to actually put the laws into the system that are measurable and calculable. Therefore, the intellectual being would have a capacity of intelligence beyond what any man would ever be capable of. So it's impossible. Finally, have you ever seen the wind? If you have, I would like you to tell me what it looks like. Or have you ever seen the results of the wind? No one's ever seen the wind. You've seen the results. The laws of nature
are the divine expression of the intelligence of a creator that we cannot fathom. God is a fact. There's nothing else to talk about.
I really enjoy that. Let's bring on Robert.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that actually was born from day one. It sealed through canopy of trees up in Westchester County, New York, above the city, and asked God, what's my purpose in life? And of course, God did not answer me that day, and he didn't answer me anytime soon. But the answers kind of arrived in 2020 to fight the evil cabal. And so I know my purpose the last couple of years. This is the path he put me on a long time ago. And I'm one of the lucky ones to realize that God has always been with me. But most people do not. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what's interesting is it wasn't until I was actually, and this was years ago, it was probably 5-6 years ago, I was having a discussion about astrophysics, astrodynamics, and time-place positioning. And in the middle of the conversation, I was actually explaining my position, and I realized that it almost became impossible to rationalize these concepts without understanding that it really is the equations and the geometry of the system. And if you go back to the ancient philosophers, that's where they were. Everything in 3 dimensions is geometry. It's the harmonical resonance that gives the physical presence of reality. And what we don't understand is the laws of nature, even nature itself. You know, you talk about the Fibonacci spiral. Well, that can be measured. Yep. It can be calculated, and it's indisputable. It's in everything. Well, that's coming from the underlying system that is the pressure system that pushes on us to keep our physical nature. And as you start to put the math to it and the geometry to it, you realize it would require some sort of intelligence that we can't get our brain to rationalize. Maybe Jesus did. Maybe that's what it was. And I think Jesus did. I think Jesus figured it out. And I think when he says, I walk with God, is because he ran out of questions. He knew what God knew. And if you run out of questions and you have all the answers, you win the game. You're king. And that's what Jesus was saying.
Yep. Everything in this world, in the natural world, in the planets, solar system, everything in the universe recycles. Everything is actually, when you break it all down, like you said, is simple. It's all math-based. I have an autistic son who's nonverbal, who at 13 years old taught himself Russian because he had full recall of 80 episodes of a kid's cartoon called Dexter's Laboratory, and he was able to figure out understanding Russian. Of course, he doesn't speak, but he understood it a week later. Right. I'm like, how's that possible? Oh, because all languages in the world are math-based. Everything in the universe is math-based. That's the common denominator.
Right. And it's interesting. So we've been led astray. Okay. We've been led astray by, and if you want to call it the powers that be or whatever, whoever you want to call them, whatever label you want to drop on them, it's fine. But really what we never really rationalized was, you know, our nation itself is an expression of philosophical reasoning and thinking that had evolved over time. So when we say the Republic, we're not talking about something arbitrary. We're talking about something that came from the mind of a man who walked the earth that rationalized the concept that was then brought into reality by our forefathers who studied those concepts. And that's the hardest part right now is we don't have the education that they had. So we try to interpret through ignorance instead of going and searching and finding. And really, when we go back to that concept, now we can go back to, we don't even know the exploration of the depths of our brain and what we're really capable of. We've been labeled and told by quote unquote professionals or doctors or whatever certificate title you want to give them that man only uses 10% of his brain. Well, yep. You got to go activate the rest of it. And certain people have certain activations. Your son, the verbal mechanisms those neurons might not be connected, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have other neurons connected that we don't have. And that's really, when we talk about disability, I have ADHD, right? Attention deficit disorder. It's not a disorder. I absorb information at a very high speed. the system is too slow because the system is dragging us backwards, trying to make the last get to the first. But in reality, they're not last. They're just different. And we never took into account that our educational construct was about we were supposed to have the Greek education. We were supposed to have the conversations. And through dialogue, we expand our horizons of our mind and we develop those new neural pathways. And that our education system is pulpit preaching, which is where someone takes an interpretation of something and they basically tell us that that interpretation is true and we're to accept it and we're going to be tested on their truth. But how do we know that it's true? And that's the problem right now. We're not developing those conversations. We're not having those philosophical conversations. It was funny. I was out the other day. I was playing poker with some friends, right? And I had a conversation that was political. And they said, we shouldn't talk about religion or politics at the poker table. And I looked and I said, what's interesting? Religion and politics are the two primary things in our entire society that are messed up right now. When exactly do we have the conversation? Because back in the day, those were the conversations that created America. So when are we going to start having these conversations? It's our limitation of those conversations that's making this worse.
Now, people are trying to shut us down. That's another tactic that the left and the right both use. It's old school stuff. Let's go to image number 6, the Four Horsemen, because I love when you explain this to me, your interpretation of this. Leave that image up there for a minute, Carl. Let Robert go through each one of the horsemen and explain it from a legal vista.
So, in my opinion, the Four Horsemen are the process of warfare. You got to remember, when we talk about the Bible, we talk about law, ecclesiastical law. When we talk about law, we talk about the Republic because it's a nation of laws. And these are some of the skills that have been deprived. But when I look at the Four Horsemen, all I see is the process, the executing process. So we're going to go left to right, right? Left to right. So we're going to take the first horse, right? The white horse. What does white represent? Well, it represents purity or the greatest reflection, right? Because if we understand how color works, white does not absorb light. It reflects it, where black absorbs the most amount of light. And that's really another science thing. But he carries a bow, and he is the king, right?
Yeah.
Well, what does a bow do? Well, a bow has arrows. And a rider on a horse with a bow takes aim. He chooses his battles. He pulls the trigger when he's ready, at the right moment, at the right time, when he is properly prepared in righteousness and justice with knowledge and wisdom. And he is sought, and he is found, and he is prepared to go to battle. And that's what the white horse represents. So then we go to the red horse. Well, who is the red horse? Well, the red horse is the action of war. It is the battle, the red horse, the engagement. And he gets a sword and he's told to go out and conquer, and he conquers. And that's what the red horse is. It's actually the conduction of warfare, right? Now, it's physical warfare, or it's the double-edged sword of our mouth when we're in the courtroom, or we're in having debate and discussion to find the truth, because that's what we should always be seeking. You got the black horse. Well, what does the black horse represent? Carries justice, carries the scales of justice, or the measurements, or the weights, right? And the black horse is, when the scoring is done, we will weigh the score. And that a jury calls that deliberation. That's where they deliberate on yes or no. That's the questions that are answered. That is the scales of justice. And then once it's been determined who wins, the person who loses, well, that's Hades. And that's the pale horse, because Hades follows with him. And the man that thought he was right, but he really just wanted to be right, will learn death, because he will be delivered to hell.
That is a terrific explanation. So it's for the audience again, too much Hollywood, too much misunderstanding. The word apocalypse is the great unveiling. Armageddon, that's the kind of Ragnarok, end of the World War. That they're separate. And the Four Horsemen, like you said, it's all about parables and things of that nature. So it doesn't mean it's the end of the world of Four Horsemen. I think it's different. It's everyone's individual judgment, maybe, but it's different than what we've been told and sold for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really hard. I have a lot of friends who are Christians, and listen, I've read the Quran, I've read the Vedas, I've read the Book of the Dead, the Book of Life from ancient Egypt. I've read the Bible. I cite the Bible a lot because I seem to attach to it the most. But I also cite the Quran, and there's some stuff in there, and I think that any religion can be fanaticized. And I think they have. And just like this whole apocalypse, Jesus said, I spoke in parables. He said it. He said, I'm not telling you exactly what I'm saying. He said, I'm telling you a riddle. It's an allegory. You have to find where it fits. And the thing about that is, if you think about it, why would he have to speak in parables? Well, what did they do to the Library of Alexandria? What have they done throughout time? What have they done to our laws? They have hidden them. They have suppressed them. They have lied. They have suppressed common law. It's still there. It sits there the whole time, waiting for us to take a hold of it and attach ourselves to it. It didn't go anywhere. We couldn't see it because we didn't seek it. And that's what Jesus did. He left the riddles for us because he knew that if he told us exactly what to do, they would burn the libraries to the ground. And it's all about destroying the information to keep slavery on the people.
Right, keep the people in the dark. We're taking a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and play the next video from Robert, which is on government duties and responsibilities, not their rights. I love this video. We'll be right back with Robert Kraft.
Did you know that there is a community of human beings that live to be well over 100 years old? It's true. The Hunza people live to be anywhere between 120 to 140 years old. Their secret? Vitamin B17. At Richardson Nutrition Center, founder John Richardson and his family have made it their mission to add vitamin B17 back into the human diet. Vitamin B17 is found in over 1,200 foods in nature and has been gradually eliminated from the human diet throughout the past 100 years. Over the past 20 years, our products have helped customers with immune support, energy, heart health, and much more. At Richardson Nutrition Center, we have developed a product line to easily incorporate B17 back into your diet. Use your special American Media Periscope code AMP888 to receive 15% off your first order at rncstore.com.
Hey friends, Dr. Michelle and I are not celebrity doctors. You probably won't see us interviewed by Oprah, but we see wonderful results in the lives of our patients every single day. We see results.
While most medical practices are focused on managing your symptoms, we help you find the root cause and find healing with proven and natural solutions. Will you take 12 seconds and go to Sherwood.tv and join our free newsletter? We'll keep you up to date on new interviews and practical tips for hope and health. Visit Sherwood.tv and subscribe.
Yes, so interesting video coming out from Robert Kraft. What is the government's role actually versus the people? Let's play video number 4.
What's up, everybody? So, I know everybody's screaming about the Constitution. I have constitutional rights. Well, let's get something straight. You don't have constitutional rights. The Constitution, or at least the main body of the Constitution, is the limits and boundaries of obedience that the government has. And by the way, the government doesn't have any rights. The government has a right to do everything, anything. What they have is authorizations and consents. And if they have not been authorized to do something, they are out of bounds. They have superseded the limits of their mandate. We the people, have a Bill of Rights, and we have rights. Okay? And that is not the Constitution. That is the bills of rights that were passed after under the Anti-Federalist Papers. So, you have a Bill of Rights because you have rights. The government has boundaries and duties and no rights. No right to defend themselves, no right to protect themselves, only duties and boundaries. And that is the Constitution, which is a compact. Bill of Rights and the rights thereof are rights that need to be claimed when you're transgressed. So if you really want to know what the Bill of Rights is, for all of you who are screaming, I want you to think about this. The Bill of Rights is a weapon when you crap on someone that they get to tell you and they get to pull it out and they get to claim a right of protection for your bad behavior. So all of you out there that are screaming and yelling about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and you have rights, you better think about that and you better think about your actions, because it's the ability to tell you you screwed up and you're going to answer for it. You don't exactly know what you're screaming about, and you don't know what the weapon actually is. It is a weapon for someone who is punished to claim a right of protection, and that's anyone who feels that they've been punished. That's what it is. God bless.
So yesterday I had David Shostokis, the constitutional expert, the attorney who ran for Attorney General in Illinois, and he said 3 documents. Declaration of Independence is the spirit. The U.S. Constitution is the execution of the spirit of freedom, right? Those two go together. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments. That's what they are. Let's bring on Robert Kraft.
Hey. Yeah, that video is a little bit old, and it's not wrong, and I hold, but I have grown my understanding exponentially on that premise concept of that video, so it holds true, and it's held the test. So
yeah, it does, and you know what people have been screaming about since the last 31 months of COVID is the fact of the mandates. You know, they claim consent. There was no consent. They've been coercing these vaccines on everybody. They've been coercing the lockdowns on everyone. It's just amazing what's been going on, and people really don't realize they actually have the rights. And no, the government is not God, not at all. And people don't really understand that. They believe it is, but they've snookered.
Yeah, you're right. So let's expand on that video a little bit more because there were some details, and the attorney that you spoke about, he's right. But here's the problem. Those words, and we're in this war of words. There's a reason in the Bible it said Adam named everything. It's because the words are the sword. The words have power. It's funny, when we were kids, it was sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words have created and destroyed nations and people. Don't ever forget that. Words are more powerful because they are penned in iron. And they last time. So words are way worse than getting punished physically. And that's the truth. So I agree with him, but let's take it into a more malleable context. All right. We're going to start with the Declaration. The Declaration of Independence was the transition of English. So I'm going to leave it in layman's terms. They were Englishmen under the crown, and this has been going on for 20 years. I've read all the Benjamin Franklin's writings that I could get my hands on. There's some interesting stuff in there, by the way. But it was 20 years earlier that he actually predicted America would actually declare independence. 20 years. So think about that.
Wow.
It's we're not told that detail. Like, this had been coming for 20 years. We hear about, it was about tea. And it was, no. There was a long train of abuses. Okay, that's why they wrote it. A long train. This is just the one thing, but there's been many other transgressions that led up to this. Okay, so they're trying to act in the spirit of cooperation. They're trying to communicate. They're trying to say, we want representation. We want to have a say. Well, the parliament had them under the thumb. The legislators had them under the thumb. And I want you to think about this, because you can take King George and you can put him right in Washington or right in Tallahassee in Florida. Okay. They literally are acting exactly the same as that long train of abuses in the enumerations of our Declaration of Independence. Why? Because there's no new game. So the declaration, the reason a declaration must be designated is because to put yourself into a new government, you have to shed the skin of tyranny, or you have to shed your old government. You have to, and this is funny, you have to extract yourself and say, I don't want to be a part of your delusion anymore. I want to go play in another playground. That's what a declaration is. The Declaration of Independence was the notice to the crown, the people of the United States, the people are done. You are no longer going to be over them. They no longer swear any allegiance to you. They walk independently and free. What it actually did lawfully is that it converted them from Englishmen to Americans. That convergence of transition is a legal common law transition to declare we are Americans and we are people of America, and we are no longer loyal to this government, which was an aristocracy at the time. So then, if you get through that, so that's the spirit, right? Then you get to the Constitution. We had the Articles of Confederation, and then we went through a process of that, because if you think about it, why were the Articles of Confederation actually stopped? Well, they were stopped because it wasn't enough government. See, we're trying to find the proper measurement between government and individual rights. That's really the game that's being played back and forth. And they've been trying to do this for thousands of years. What is the proper amount of government? What is the proper amount of individual rights? And where can we find a harmony between both? And that's really the battle that goes on. And that's what they were trying to do. So they reached into antiquity and they pull out the Republic, Plato's Republic, right? Written or expressed by Socrates, written by Plato. They take the Republic and they're like, okay, and this actually is the model that Jesus Christ stood for, where you're the kingdom, you're the temple, right? It's about you and your relationship with God. You have rights. You are the kingdom. You are the temple. You don't have to go through anyone, and you owe no one else except the truth and the facts and righteousness, loyalty. Everything else comes below it. And that's really, really on the lines of the teachings of Jesus Christ. So now we have a government of law, not a government of command, but at the consent of the people or the objection of the people. And that's what the Constitution is. Consent or objection. But remember, silence is consent by omission. And that's something we've lost. That's the kicker we've lost. We don't know where to speak, and we don't know how to properly speak, because those mechanisms have been delayed. The other part I want to elaborate on is I'm right. I was correct in my expression at that time. What I've recently put together is it's not just the Bill of Rights. It's actually the preamble of the Constitution. And this is backed up at the Library of Congress. James Monroe said the preamble is the key to the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton in Federalist Paper 84 said they don't need a Bill of Rights. They already have the preamble. Well, that's very powerful words. It's the preamble are the citizens' duties of how they can impose their will. How they can impose their will on government. The stated rights come from Thomas Paine and Patrick Henry, which are we already know that. We want you to write it down, because we already know that they're going to try and change the words, because that's what they've done throughout time. So put it in writing. And there we have the Bill of Rights.
It's really fascinating. So, we got not much time left, so I want to go through your images. Let's go to image number 7, which is Declaration Natural Person. Let's just show that image. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So in this ideology or this philosophical concept, we really have to start trying to conceptualize what was the Bill of Rights and what did it mean to one person. So what I did is I actually changed or actually modified the Constitution, or I'm sorry, the Declaration of Independence into an individual, me, and I gave my perceptions of the abuses of what our government has done. Because when I read it, it's exactly what they're doing, exactly the precision, what they're doing. So we're right back where we started again.
Okay, how about image number 8, Declaration of People Supremacy? Even more interesting.
Yeah, so this is actually a pretty interesting concept. As I did a lot of reading with Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, I listened to George Washington's farewell address and studied it. I realized there have been many republics throughout mankind. There have been many constitutions. We and really these are the teachings of Jesus Christ. We are trying to lead our world to a place where each individual has the proper amount of individual rights and a mechanism to enforce those rights versus the relationship with democracy, which is the masses or the individuals in power and their ability to defend themselves by word or sword. And that's really what this is. This takes it to a global level and says, this is really what they were telling us. George Washington said, we hope that this Constitution will be the Constitution for all mankind. So they are really trying to write a Constitution for humanity.
I think it has an opportunity once the old beast system crashes, because it can't go on anymore. I think we've come to the end of the road of their Sumerian, Babylonian beast system, and it's done. It's over with. There's nothing on the other side, right? And everything's being exposed now. So I do feel like we're in the book of Revelation, that we are in the apocalypse. The great unveiling is happening in front of our eyes for the last 2 years, and now it's picking up speed. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's definitely a spiritual awakening happening, and we really have to get back to the spiritual concepts of the Bible and in the Quran and these great, magnificent philosophical doctrines. But we have to start accepting that not everything is physical. There is a intellectual, the concept to these writings, and including the Constitution and the Declaration. And it's starting to happen. But the reality is, you can't have a Renaissance unless you have a Dark Age. And we had a lot of skins to shed. When they wrote the Constitution, they knew that slavery still existed. They knew that women couldn't vote. They knew that. Plato said 2,400 years ago that women will be completely equal. There was no difference. They referenced slaves and barbarians in Plato. They were the ignorant. They were the people who didn't have an education. They were the people who were dumb, honestly. And that's what they were saying was they're the barbarians. That's what they're talking about. And they're saying that they get angry all the time. We are going through that presence where people are starting to wake up. They're starting to ask real questions. They're starting to have real conversations. And they are looking to say, what is this supposed to look like? And that's where we're headed now. And I believe it. It's happening. Everyone can feel it. People are talking. I talk to someone almost every day that says this game is up. It is over. They're going down. And that's just the way it's going to be. But that's what always happens. The good part about evil is that it eats itself. And then you're right. They start pointing fingers at each other. They can't help it. It's just the game.
That's human nature as well, right? It's a primordial instinct to survive. None of it's about a me culpa, like, oh, I have a moral compass. They don't have a moral compass at all. It is about survival, the reputation, their money, and not going into jail or being executed or whatever. But it's about survival only. That's what they're doing. We got about a minute left. Before I let you close out, I want to say one thing. Jesus Christ said, I am the sword that divides families and nations. What does he really mean by that? He's the sword of truth. It's not vaccines that divided families or vaccines that divided nations. It is truth versus evil and lies that have divided nations and families in the last couple of years. Go ahead, your thoughts on that and close out.
Yeah, well, that's it. It says we're supposed to seek God, but we can't conceptualize God. So let's make it easy. God, what is God in the physical realm? And this is our physical realm, 3 dimensions. Well, God's a truth. God's a fact. God is 2 + 2 is 4. God is righteousness. That's what God is. So if you're following that, you're following Jesus, and Jesus was the Word, then you're walking those lines. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try. And if you're trying, then you're walking the right road. You'll get revealed what your weaknesses are, and those will get cleaned up as long as you have some humbleness and humility.
Robert Krappen, terrific having you on. I'm going to bring you on my other show. It's called DEFCON 5. It's a military focus show on Thursdays and Fridays. I co-host it with Josh Reed, a former serviceman, and we can get into all the vaccines and all the Agent Orange stuff on that show because I think you're too good a guest not to do that with you. So we'll set something up for you in August. Great to see you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. So that was really interesting. Well, tomorrow on DEFCON 5, Josh Reed and I are interviewing Jason Sakura. We're going to get into Disclosure 4, which will premiere next Monday. So you really want to watch. Josh and I get him and Jason Sakura. He's got a platform called Unified. He's been bringing up the truth. I've met him in Tampa last year. Really great patriot. He's from Israel. Super bright, young guy. There's hope for the future. This is James Crumick signing off from Unrestricted Truths. Have a good night, everybody.